What's going on, Packer fans? Welcome into the Pack-A-Day podcast. Happy Saturday. I'm your host, Andy Herman. Hope your weekend is getting started off strong. If you're a Brewer fan, it certainly did on Friday, but we're not here to talk Brewers. We're here to talk Packers. And if there was ever any question as to why I do this 365 days a year and as to why the podcast goes 365 days a year, well, we found out just another great example as to why this week, because there has been an insane amount of information and injuries and almost trades and free agent signings. We have, of course, Packers-Steelers that we broke down throughout the week. We get ready for Packers-Bengals. Then you've got a potential Stephon Gilmore trade or signing. Jalen Smith signs. You've got Roswell Douglas. You've got Jaire Alexander's injury issue. Like, it has been a crazy whirlwind week. I don't know about you guys, but the week went just insanely fast for me. And now it's kind of like, all right, we've got all of that done. Now it's on to Packers-Bengals. We can kind of solely focus on that. And of course, that's going to be our main topic for today, and specifically some of those injury issues. We did get more clarity from Matt LaFleur on Thursday about Jaire Alexander's injury issues. It sounds like he's going to be out at least a few weeks. It wouldn't shock me if on Saturday they put him on IR to shut him down for at least 3 weeks and pull somebody up either from the practice, probably from the practice squad in this situation. We'll see if that's the direction they go or if they keep his eligibility available maybe for 3 weeks from now. We'll see. But we know for certain Jaire Alexander is not going to play. Now, I had the opportunity to ask Matt LaFleur on Thursday or Wednesday or Thursday, I think it was Wednesday actually, if in fact Jaire Alexander did have to have surgery, if that would end his season. And that was his impression, that yes, it would end his season, at least most likely is what he said. It would end his season. So you can understand why they really want to avoid Jaire Alexander having any sort of surgery at all costs, especially in an all-in sort of season. So the only real clarity from a timetable standpoint that we have at this point is that he's at least going to be out this week and probably for at least a few weeks, and then we'll get probably some clarity at that point. You hope at some point, you would love to see Jaire Alexander and David Bakhtiari and Zadarius Smith like just kind of come in waves, right? Bakhtiari comes back healthy. Maybe Elton comes back healthy this week. So you start with Elton, then get Bakhtiari back, then maybe get Jaire back, and then maybe end of the year you get Zadarius Smith back and almost work it in reverse, right? Where instead of having all these injuries that are like happening and they're leaving through the course of the season, hopefully Green Bay can slowly start getting these guys back and reintegrated and healthy. Wishful thinking probably, but that would be nice if it could happen in that way. But again, most importantly for the here and now, Jaire Alexander out this weekend. We also learned that Josh Myers is out against the Bengals, has a finger issue and injury. It sounded like there was some hope that he was maybe going to be able to practice on Friday and go on Sunday. That ends up not being the case. So Green Bay will have to reshuffle that offensive line a little bit more. And just how much they have to reshuffle it will certainly be dependent upon a couple other injuries. Elton Jenkins is listed as questionable, although he has practiced the last couple days. So that certainly lends itself to, have you believe that he'd be ready to go on Sunday. You certainly don't take that for granted or say that's for certain until you see him get, dressed and that he's active on Sunday. But it certainly seems to be trending in the right direction. And then Dennis Kelly remains questionable with an illness as well. So we'll get to how those injuries affect kind of the lineup, especially on the offensive line in just a moment. But we do have a couple other notes as well with the roster this week. Jalen Smith just recently signed. Matt LaFleur said he would not play this weekend. So even though there's nothing injury related here, Smith will not play. And because of that, that's just another player that will be down this weekend. And then you still have Tyler Lancaster on the COVID IR list. So it's feasible at least, although I think unlikely, that he could have his second negative COVID test on Saturday, which would make him eligible for Sunday. There hasn't seemingly been any indication of that, so my guess is he's going to be out. But that's another player that's down and certainly affects that defensive line rotation. When Lancaster's in there, he's been playing a little bit more nose tackle, which allows Kenny to move around a little bit more. Without him, you see Kenny a lot at nose tackle, which makes him a little bit more predictable, which makes things easier on the offense. So that's another injury that will maybe not at the top of your mind. And because he's on the COVID and not on the actual injury list, another illness that's costing Green Bay a player likely this upcoming weekend. So let's jump into the offensive line, because there's a scenario here, right, where Myers is out, Jenkins is out, and Kelly is out. And if that's the case, like in an insane way, right, you have David Bakhtiari, you've got Dennis Kelly, Elton Jenkins, and Josh Myers all out. Rick Wagner and Corey Linsley, who left in free agency, and you're still left with a starting offensive line that probably looks like Yosh Nijman, John Runyan Jr., Lucas Patrick, Royce Newman, and Billy Turner. Is that ideal? No. But the fact that you've got 5 guys that are all starting caliber players, or at least, pretty darn close, with down all of those guys, it's just an incredible testament to the depth of this offensive line. Now, that said, if all those guys are hurt and you've got Yosh, John Runyan Jr., Patrick Newman, and Turner as your starters, Jake Hansen would be the only guy left on the actual roster that is not hurt if all those guys were out. So if Elton Jenkins and Dennis Kelly and Josh Myers all cannot go, you're getting ridiculously thin on the offensive line. Now, the even more insane part is they probably just pull up Ben Braden from the practice squad and feel pretty good. He looked pretty darn good at guard and at tackle in training camp and in preseason. Is it ideal? Probably not. But the fact that they just have that guy chilling out on the practice squad that, oh, by the way, they also probably feel pretty okay with if he needs to take some serious snaps. It's just, again, an absolute testament to Brian Gutekunst, the scouting staff, Adam Stenovich, to have this offensive line with as many players that they have on it. They also have Cole Van Lanen on the practice squad that they could pull up as well. My guess is that Jenkins is going to go. Hopefully Dennis Kelly's able to provide depth and get back from that illness as well. But if Elton is back, they are going to have some choices, right? And I'm primarily talking this week here. I think there's absolutely a time in the future, probably next season, where you could look at Elton Jenkins as your right tackle of the future. I think that will absolutely be in play. I don't expect that to be anytime soon. Billy Turner's playing very good football at right tackle right now, so I don't expect that to be this season. I don't think, in the long term that Elton Jenkins is going to be in play at center either. I think Josh Myers is going to hold down that spot when he's healthy. I also think that, of course, when David Bakhtiari comes back, he's going to be at left tackle. And then, of course, Elton Jenkins is going to slot in at one of those guards. So for the most part, all of the logistics here are going to take care of themselves as players are hopefully healthy sooner rather than later. But for this week, it's kind of interesting. So if Jenkins is healthy, they could just insert him at center and have Yosh play left tackle and say, we're going to go with the same lineup we had last week and the week before, except we'll put Elton in at center instead of Myers because Myers is going to be out. And that's a fairly easy fix, right? Like you upgrade at center and everything else remains the same. No big deal, right? That's absolutely one direction they could go in. They could also put Elton Jenkins at left tackle for Yosh and then put Lucas Patrick in at center for Josh Myers. There's also a situation where you could have Yosh at left tackle, you could have Lucas Patrick at center, and you could put Elton in at one of the guard spots, likely for Royce Newman. I think that's a less likely scenario. Where I think they would go if Elton is healthy this week, I think they would put him at left tackle, and I think they would put Lucas Patrick at center. My guess is they're going to want the center to be somebody that worked with Rodgers and this offense all week long. Getting in the rhythm to making those calls and those checks at the line of scrimmage, being on the same page as Aaron Rodgers, that's going to be something that's really important, especially going down the road, potentially working with a silent count. And I think Lucas Patrick has all of that experience, as well as being able to work with Rodgers probably all week in Josh Myers' absence. So my guess is that Lucas Patrick will line up at center. I think you're likely going to see John Runyan Jr. and Royce Newman keep their left and right guard spots, and of course, Billy Turner at right tackle, which then just would make the easy swap of if Elton Jenkins is ready to go, you put him in at left tackle, let Yosh be the first guy in off the bench, and then if you need a guard, you move Elton Jenkins, or if you need a center, you move Elton Jenkins at that point. But I think they're going to want to have some continuity. I think Lucas Patrick being able to practice all week with, I'm assuming, I wasn't there, but I'm assuming with the ones at center, I think that's probably the direction they will go in, but they do have some options because of the ridiculous versatility of Elton Jenkins. So certainly some decisions to make, and I think those are the injuries that are really going to affect the offensive line. Of course, Jaire being out will affect the cornerback position as well. Fully expect Kevin King and Eric Stokes on the outside with Chandon Sullivan in the slot. I don't think anything else makes sense there. I don't think Rasul Douglas or Isaac Adam are going to be in the starting conversation unless, there's a lot of injuries that take place. I think Shamar is definitely behind Chandon as far as a slot corner goes at this point. So unless something crazy happens, I would fully expect Stokes King with Sullivan in the slot. I think those are kind of the main things. We do get some Green Bay return from injuries as well. Kevin King, Chris Barnes, both returning. So that should certainly help the defense this week, as much as, maybe Kevin King will help a defense, but I do think Chris Barnes will help, and you have that consistency back at linebacker playing alongside Devondre Campbell. And then again, with Jaire being out, Kevin King actually is a pretty big return for this defense. Some potential practice squad call-ups. I already mentioned Ben Brading could be one if there's some injuries to the offensive line. Same thing with Cole Van Lanen. He could be in that discussion as well. EQ could be another call-up for MVS. They did protect him again this week. If Tyler Lancaster is on the COVID list, you get one COVID call-up that doesn't count towards your two injured, your two practice squad call-ups for the year. So even though EQ has been called up twice, one of those was a COVID call-up last week for Lancaster. They could do the same thing this week, so he would still have eligibility to be called up one more time this season. And then Tipa Nalii could be another player that gets called up due to the lack of edge rushers. Ladarius Hamilton is still, I'm sure, a little bit new and getting ingrained in the system. So having Tipa, who's been here for, all of last year, all of this offseason, I think could potentially be somebody that they call up and could, potentially play some on special teams as well. We should find out on Saturday if any of those players do in fact get called up to the practice squad. As far as the Bengals injury report goes, Xavier Su'a-Filo is listed as out. He's a backup rotational offensive lineman. Mike Thomas, the wide receiver, not Michael Thomas from the Saints, but Mike Thomas from the Bengals, is doubtful for the Bengals this week. Then you've got Trey Hopkins, Joe Mixon, Larry Ogunjobi, Dante Smith, and Trey Waynes all listed as questionable. We could go over all of those, but I think the more important ones are the ones that didn't practice on Friday. That usually, again, lends itself to potentially not playing on Sunday. The two that didn't practice on Friday, Joe Mixon and Larry Ogunjobi. Now, it sounds like Ogunjobi may be some illness, as well as a knee, but he practiced up until the illness, it sounds like. So if he gets healthy in time, he could certainly be somebody that's back. But Joe Mixon did not practice all week long. That would be a major loss for this Bengals team if he's not able to play. Going from Joe Mixon to Samaje Perine and Chris Evans is definitely a downgrade. Joe Mixon's able to be used so seamlessly out of the backfield. He's obviously a dynamic runner. So that would be a major, major loss for the Bengals. And if you're, looking at the injury report for who may go or who may not go, I think easily the two biggest names is Elton Jenkins active for Green Bay, is Joe Mixon active for the Bengals. Everyone else is either pretty much already decided or, maybe not that important. Trey Hopkins is their starting center. So if for some reason he was all of a sudden unable to go, it would certainly affect the Bengals interior, their offensive line, but he practiced on Friday, which leads me to believe that he will be able to go on Sunday. So those are the injury updates. And again, I think if you're wanting to take a look on Sunday around, 9:30, that the inactives come out, 10:30 when they come out, 10:30 Central, definitely keep an eye out for both Joe Mixon as well as Elton Jenkins. Other piece of noteworthy news from Friday, Russell Wilson going to be out about 4 to 6 weeks with his injury issue. Why that's important to this podcast is because, of course, Green Bay plays Seattle in about 4 to 5 weeks. And that would put him right on the edge of being able to play or not. Seattle has a bye, I believe, right before that game, which, would maybe allow, a little extra time there and Wilson maybe to get healthy. But, if it takes all 6 weeks, it takes all 6 weeks, and he certainly would not be ready to go. If you're a Packer fan, nobody's cheering for injuries here, right? Everyone wants everyone to stay healthy. I think I'm safe in saying that. But it certainly makes that game a heck of a lot different and frankly easier if Geno Smith is in that game instead of Russell Wilson, and certainly changes everything up. That's a really tough stretch of games for Green Bay. So, one of those teams not having their starting quarterback would certainly be an advantage for Green Bay. Certainly a disappointment as a fan. Those Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers games are always exciting. And let's just be real, right? Replacement officials, no matter what, it's Packers, Seahawks. It'll be an insane game no matter what. And, Geno Smith, I wouldn't put anything by Seattle in those sort of games. Something crazy always happens. So who knows? But it's certainly noteworthy one way or the other that either Russell Wilson will be out that game or probably making his first start returning from that injury issue. So that will be something to keep an eye on as well. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll be right back here tomorrow with a game day preview and prediction. It'll, be up early, so make sure to check that out prior to the game. Once noon hits, that episode kind of gets counterfeit and there's not much reason to listen to it after. So make sure you jump in pregame and check that out. Until next time, and as always though, go Pack Go.